Alright, what's going on, guys? If you're a fan of the Souls series and FromSoftware's work in any capacity, then I'm sure the manga Berserk needs no introduction for you. It is the single biggest cornerstone of the Souls series, inspiring everything from the characters, the world, the lore, to the very structure of the gameplay, and the thematic ideas the game presents in the first place. And FromSoftware is not shy about that at all, being entirely unapologetic about their homage to the series and wearing that inspiration on their sleeve. And of course, Elden Ring is no stranger to that. But while the majority of these connections don't go deeper than the surface level, there's one in particular that has caught the attention of many, and may be the key to understanding the most mysterious character in the entire game. So today we're going to cover the striking similarities between Miquella and Griffith from Berserk. Now, it should go without saying that this video will contain spoilers for Berserk, pretty much the entire manga, which if you haven't already read Berserk, first off, why not? But second, you won't want to get spoiled on it. So with all that being said, if you enjoy all things FromSoftware, want to stay up to date on the news about these games, or find the lore and discussion fascinating, then go ahead and hit that subscribe button, and now let's get into it. When it comes to the lore around Miquella, we've been exploring it for a while here on the channel, primarily in relation to speculation about the DLC, as it does appear that he will be the primary focus, but in accordance with the topic of today's video, we'll be working from a level of understanding about the character, in line with what textual lore describes. And the same goes for Griffith. I'm not going to be building off any fan theories, nor speculation, so with that in mind, let's begin with the first and most obvious connection between the two characters. Although we never physically meet Miquella in the game, we do get a few images of him indirectly, as well as descriptions and lore of what his physical appearance looked like. The intro cinematic of the game gives us this image here, of Miquella being carried away by Mohg while he was in the middle of his metamorphosis. It shows us that he is a child, a young boy with very long braided blonde hair, and this is contextualized by his curse. When Miquella and Malenia were born, each came into the world afflicted by a curse. Malenia was infected with the Scarlet Rot, while Miquella was cursed with eternal childhood. Certain item descriptions describe encounters with Miquella, one of which states that the person that saw him couldn't discern whether he was a girl or a boy. We see a similar characterization with Griffith, where he has this childlike purity and beauty that borders on a feminine appearance. And that aspect is one of the most important that leads to the deeper understanding of this character. So while this appearance is the most surface level connection between Miquella and Griffith, it leads to something much deeper. The significance in their appearance creates another aspect of their characters, and that is their charisma and ability to command devotion. The Bewitching Branch item description tells us, the Empyrean Miquella is loved by many people. Indeed, he has learned very well how to compel such affection, and that devotion has spread far enough to give Miquella his own army, to the point where they'll blow themselves up in holy magic, simply in hopes that Miquella may see their light. And that phrase of learning to compel that affection does suggest a manipulative nature of Miquella. However, we are missing the pieces of the puzzle in that regard, of what Miquella's true intentions were. And that same ability to inspire devotion is found in Griffith significantly, and we do know for sure he learned to compel affection in the same way. The scene of the talk between Griffith and the princess paints that picture fairly well, where she describes him as a wondrous person, and says that she imagines all his friends must have come so far with him because of the attraction of his charm. And that aspect of Griffith is only amplified later on in the manga after his rebirth, where Gut's strongest emotion to kill him is instantly shut down, and he's left frozen by simply being in Griffith's new presence. And just as Miquella's followers wait for his return, slated in their prophecy that he will return, Griffith is often seen as the fulfillment of their White Hawk prophecy in Berserk, especially in the later chapters. But that's for reasons we'll discuss in a bit. One of the most defining qualities of Miquella is his status as an Empyrean, giving him candidacy for Godhood. In Elden Ring, he is one of 3 Empyreans, himself, Malenia, and Ranni, and Miquella is described as the most fearsome of the 3. But throughout the game, none of the 3 Empyreans ever choose to go the traditional route to Godhood. Miquella's ascent into his true form required his own sacrifice, using his body and blood to grow the Erdtree. We don't know exactly what the true nature of the Erdtree would have been, or what it ultimately would have done had it succeeded, but clearly whatever that would have been would have changed the entire world of the lands between. Griffith being a candidacy for Godhood comes in a bit of a different form. Through the workings of causality, Griffith came in contact with the egg of the king, or the Bailet, which would ultimately be the key for him to ascend into a god, or better fitting, a demon, but in order to do so would require a great sacrifice. And if you read the manga, well, you know how that turns out. But this is where we see a major shift in the motives of Miquella and Griffith. As in Elden Ring, we see Miquella have a more benevolent approach, at least according to what we hear about him. Where Miquella's sacrifice was ultimately himself, Griffith was working off pure ambition. His desire for wings and his kingdom led him to sacrifice everyone around him. But it took the crumbling of that ambition in order to drive him to the point of making that decision, with Guts, the man he respected more than anyone, leaving him, and the rigorous torture and humiliation at the hands of the country's king, destroying his physical body. And even though his friends came back for him, by that point his mind was already made up, and no matter what happened, he would never betray his dream. Miquella's situation and dream is a bit out of order compared to Griffith's. Seemingly all of Miquella's actions were done for selfless reasons, in the name of helping others and those afflicted in the lands between. Miquella's unfortunate end came after he had already set his mind on sacrificing himself and completing the Eclipse. He was ripped from the Eclipse by Mohg and his cocoon stolen, all in the name of Mohg's selfish desire to be Emperor of the New Age. And through that, we find Miquella's ambition crumbled and his physical body mangled and disfigured. Essentially what happened to Griffith, only flipped opposite in chronology and motivation. Which brings us to the most iconic point in Griffith's story, the Eclipse. Here he awakens the power of the Bailet, beginning the sacrifice of the Band of the Hawk, marking them all with the brand of sacrifice and beginning the advent that would transform him into Femto, and birthing from the egg of the king the wings he desired more than anything. It was an act entirely of selfish ambition. Miquella also had an advent eclipse of his own, and we can find the story told here at Castle Sol. From the dialogue we can hear and the items we can find in the area, this eclipse is a polar opposite of what Griffith performed. Although we don't know the mechanisms behind it, the goal of this eclipse was to give life, with Godwyn the Golden being the primary aim of that. However, for a reason we don't know, the eclipse ultimately failed. Perhaps, like the Eclipse, was a result of Miquella being kidnapped. A while after the eclipse took place in Berserk, there was an event that we'll go into detail of in a bit called the Great Roar of the Astral World that created an interstice or crossing over of the astral and the physical world. Now there's a lot more to that, but one result of this was the emergence of the city of Falconia, a new capital that would offer a safe haven for humanity among the interstice under the leadership and protection of the White Hawk, which is Griffith's form after his rebirth, but not the dark wings of Femto. The city sits at the base of the world spiral tree, which again we'll discuss more in a minute, but this is the kingdom that Griffith envisioned, the fulfillment of his ambition. Let's compare this now to Elphael, which is Miquella's great city. It too sits at the base of a tree, acting as a physical brace for the growing Halig tree. And this city also serves as a haven, a new home for the persecuted beings in the lands between, those cast aside by the Golden Order and the Greater Will itself. But this city was not built with the ambition to rule it, again directly contrasting Griffith's motivation. We don't find statues honoring Miquella alone, no throne for him to rule on, because after all this city was built thanks to his sacrifice. But what about the trees these cities are built next to? Falconia sits in full view of the world spiral tree, a direct manifestation of the interstice that roots in the physical and astral worlds, intertwining as the realities do. The branches of this tree offer paths across the world, and its many mysteries are not fully understood. Miquella's Halig tree is strikingly similar. Although when we find it in game it is withered and fallen apart, we know from iconography and depictions of the Halig tree that it was supposed to have a shape almost exactly the same as the world spiral tree. Now we don't have any direct evidence to suggest that these trees had the same objective or the same powers for that matter, but I do have a lore video suggesting that they might. If you're interested, I highly recommend checking that out. But the final connection between Miquella and Griffith is a very striking one. In Berserk, there's a very enigmatic character known as the Moonlight Boy, who only appears on nights of full moons. He's a curious and playful character with a very strong connection to Casca, who appears to have the ability to travel along the branches of the world spiral tree, an ability we can also see used by Griffith. The Moonlight Boy is a figure of many theories, with very little concrete information, but what we do come to learn is that throughout all of the visits of the Moonlight Boy to Guts and his party, it was none other than Griffith all along. Miquella also has this semi-spiritual alter ego in the form of Saint Trina, an enigmatic figure whose appearance is just as swift as their disappearance. But instead of the full moon, Saint Trina is heavily associated with dreams. And although we do know virtually nothing about this character, it is known that they are in some form Miquella, but unknown if their intentions align, which is why it's such a popular theory that this character will appear again in the DLC. So those are all the connections I could find between Miquella and Griffith, and I do think at this point the inspiration is undeniable. But while many of these connections are mainly surface level, with a few being thematically similar, Miquella and Griffith are ultimately very different characters, but neither of their stories are finished yet. There is still the possibility that Griffith was a benevolent figure all along, and his end justifies the means, or there's the possibility that Miquella was evil and manipulative from the start and has something very wicked up his sleeve. We're just going to have to wait and see how they conclude, and if these parallels continue. Either way, they're both incredible characters with what we currently have. Anyways though guys, that is going to pretty much do it for the video today. I hope you enjoyed. If you did, be sure to leave a like on it and let me know all your thoughts down in the comment section below. Be sure to subscribe if you're new around here, but with all that, I will catch you in the next one.